Chosen One. Have you been praying for decades while watching God answer everyone else's prayers but yours? Have you ever sat in church feeling like the only one whose faith is bankrupt while everyone else testifies about overflow? What if the silence you've been calling rejection was heaven sealing your soul inside a vault only God could access? But what if I told you? You weren't overlooked. You were placed in a spiritual vault, while others received quick cash, temporary comfort, fleeting favor. Heaven was depositing something different into your account, something that can't be stolen, can't be taxed, can't run out. They got the money, you got the mystery. Listen, in the silence of your struggle, God was soundproofing your soul. Every rejection was insulation. Every closed door was divine protection. Every empty pocket was preparation for what your hands are truly meant to hold. You think you're poor because your bank account is empty. But Chosen One, your spirit account is overflowing. The wealth they can see will fade. The riches you carry are eternal. That loneliness you felt, that wasn't abandonment. That was appointment. God needed you alone so he could download into you what crowds would distract from. That financial lack. That wasn't punishment. That was preparation. Heaven was keeping earthly wealth away from you until your soul could handle the weight of true abundance. You've been crying about what you don't have, while God has been celebrating what you've become. The depth, the wisdom, the unshakable faith that only comes from walking through empty seasons with a full heart. This isn't about money, beloved. This is about recognition. Tonight, in the quiet of your room, with no one watching but heaven, God is revealing who you really are, not what you own, not what you earn, not what's in your account. Who you are in the vault of his heart. If this is piercing something deep, something you never put into words, whisper back to heaven right now, God, I receive what I didn't even know I was missing, because what I'm about to show you will break open the sealed vault of your true inheritance. The wealth that's coming isn't in your hands. It's been in your heart all along. Have you ever wondered why the most faithful people you know seem to struggle the most financially? Why does it feel like God blesses everyone around you while you're still choosing between gas and groceries? What if I told you that your empty wallet isn't evidence of God's absence, but proof of his strategic planning? Listen to me carefully, Chosen One. You've been living under a spiritual misdiagnosis. The world has convinced you that your bank balance reflects your blessing level. But what if you've been reading the wrong account statement this entire time? You are not broke, you are banked, but not in any institution Wall Street would recognize. For decades, you've watched others receive what you prayed for. Promotions you deserved went to people less qualified. Business ideas you had first were stolen and made profitable by others. Opportunities that had your name on them somehow ended up in someone else's hands. You called it bad luck. You called it unfairness. You called it spiritual rejection. But heaven calls it something else entirely. Strategic preservation. Every door that closed wasn't rejection. It was God making a deposit into an account you didn't know existed. Every no you received was heaven saying, not yet, I'm storing something better. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3:1, to everything there is a season. But what the preacher didn't explain is that some seasons are for withdrawal, and some seasons are for deposit. You've been in a deposit season, beloved, and you didn't even know it. Think about Joseph. 13 years in slavery and prison. 13 years of watching his dreams die daily. 13 years of being forgotten by everyone who could have helped him. Was he broke by every earthly measure? Yes. But Pharaoh's throne was already reserved with his name on it. You see, God doesn't fund comfort. He funds calling. The money that didn't come, it would have made you comfortable in a season when he needed you hungry. The promotion you didn't get, it would have trapped you in a building when he's preparing you for a platform. The relationship that ended, it would have drained your energy when he's been storing it for something greater. You've been God's safety deposit box storing value you didn't know you carried. Every sacrifice you made in silence, every bill you paid late to help someone else, every time you gave your last dollar and trusted God to multiply it, every season you chose faith over fear, hope over bitterness, worship over worry. Those weren't just acts of obedience. Those were spiritual investments being compounded in heaven's economy. The prophet Malachi spoke of God opening windows in heaven. But here's what most people miss before God opens windows. He first builds vaults. And you, chosen one, you've been living in the vault season, protected, preserved, prepared. But something is shifting in the atmosphere. The vault door is creaking open. You think you've been surviving check to check. But the truth is you've been living prophecy to prophecy. Each struggle wasn't random, it was prophetic preparation. Each delay wasn't punishment, it was positioning. Your lack wasn't rejection, it was reserve. And what's been in reserve is about to be released. But understand this, the wealth that's coming won't look like what you expected. It's not just money, it's access, it's influence. It's the ability to shift atmospheres and change generations with your presence alone. You've been carrying treasure in earthen vessels, as Paul said in 2 Corinthians 4:7. But now God is ready to reveal what's been hidden inside you. Wisdom that can't be taught in business schools. Insight that can't be bought with degrees. Authority that can't be earned through networking. This is why the devil fought so hard to keep you down. He knew what God was building in you during the lean years. He saw the vault being filled while you only saw the struggle. But his time is up. Right now, in this very moment, heaven is authorizing a transfer from the spiritual realm to the natural realm, from the vault of your soul to the visible areas of your life. The promotion isn't coming because you deserve it. It's coming because you're ready for it. The business idea isn't manifesting because it's profitable. It's manifesting because it's prophetic. The relationships that are shifting aren't changing because of luck. They're aligning because of God's love. This isn't about money, beloved. This is about mandate. God didn't preserve you through poverty to make you comfortable. He refined you through lack to make you a leader. He didn't keep you humble to keep you hidden. He kept you humble to handle what's about to be revealed. You are not poor. You are pre-funded, not for comfort, but for impact. Every generation that struggled before you, every ancestor who sacrificed so you could be here, every prayer that seemed unanswered, it all led to this moment, this activation, this release. The vault is opening, but you must claim what's yours. Pause right here. Don't keep scrolling. Don't let this moment pass. Whisper these words out loud. God, unlock what you hid in me. Say it like you mean it. Say it like your life depends on it. Because in this season, your covenant with God requires your voice, not just your faith. This isn't just a prayer. This is a spiritual contract. This is you agreeing to receive what you didn't even know you were missing. The question isn't whether God can bless you. The question is whether you're ready to stop living like a victim and start walking like the vault you've always been. So what will it be, chosen one? Will you keep counting what you lack? Or will you start accessing what you carry? Now that you understand you've been banked, not broke, let me reveal something that will completely revolutionize how you see your relationship with God. You've been trying to pay heaven with prayers, when heaven only accepts obedience. You've been tithing tears, but expecting cash dividends. You've been depositing devotion, but withdrawing doubt when the account doesn't show what you think it should. But chosen one, what if I told you that every act of obedience you've ever performed has been building compound interest in an economy that operates beyond Wall Street, beyond the Federal Reserve, beyond anything the natural world can measure? In the kingdom, the dollar is obedience. The interest is souls. And you, dear warrior, have been making payments for decades without even realizing it. Think about this for a moment. Every time you forgave when it hurt, every time you gave when you barely had enough, every time you said yes to God when your flesh screamed no, every time you chose worship over worry, faith over fear, trust over trauma, those weren't just good deeds. Those were spiritual transactions. The Bible declares in 1 Samuel 15:22, to obey is better than sacrifice. But most people miss the weight of that verse. It's not just about being good. It's about understanding that obedience is the only currency heaven recognizes. You can't buy your way into breakthrough. You can't negotiate your way into favor. You can't manipulate your way into miracles. But you can obey your way into overflow. And here's the shocking truth that will shake you to your core. What felt like loss was actually payment in the spirit. Every job you lost for standing on principle. Every relationship that ended because you wouldn't compromise your values. Every opportunity you walked away from because it didn't align with God's voice. Every dollar you gave when your bank account was already bleeding. The world called it foolishness. Your family called it impractical. Your friends called it financial suicide. But heaven called it currency exchange. You weren't losing. You were investing in eternity. Abraham understood this when God asked him to sacrifice Isaac in Genesis 22. The moment Abraham raised that knife, he made a payment in the currency of radical obedience. And before the blade could fall, God provided the ram. Why? Because obedience had already purchased the provision. You've been operating in that same economy, chosen one. You just didn't know it. Every sleepless night you spent praying for someone else. Every time you chose to bless when you needed blessing. Every moment you worshiped God in the darkness when you couldn't see His hand. Those weren't acts of desperation. Those were acts of deposit. And the compound interest has been building for decades. But here's where most people miss it. They expect the return to come in the same form as the payment. They give money and expect money back. They give time and expect immediate results. They give love and expect love returned from the same source. But God's economy doesn't work that way. You gave obedience in one area, and He's preparing blessing in another. You invested faithfulness in relationships, and He's releasing favor in your career. You planted integrity in small things, and He's growing influence in big things. The prophet Malachi spoke of God opening the windows of heaven in chapter 3, verse 10. But notice what triggers the opening, bringing the whole tithe into the storehouse. Not just money, the whole tithe. Your complete obedience, your total surrender, your undivided devotion. And when you bring that level of commitment, God promises to pour out a blessing so great you won't have room enough to store it. That's not talking about a bank account, beloved. That's talking about an overflow that spills into every area of your existence. But you must understand the timing. Heaven's fiscal year doesn't align with Earth's calendar. God's quarterly reports aren't based on human expectations. His return on investment is calculated in generational impact, not quarterly profits. You've been obedient for decades and you've wondered where the reward is. But what if the reward is waiting on the other side of consistency? What if one more act of obedience is the final payment needed to unlock everything God has been preparing? This is why the enemy has fought so hard to get you to quit. He knows what's about to be released. He's seen the balance in your spiritual account. He knows that your next yes to God could trigger an avalanche of blessing that transforms not just your life, but the lives of everyone connected to you. You haven't been broke. You've been building. You haven't been forgotten. You've been funded. Your obedience has been purchasing things in the spirit realm that your eyes haven't seen yet, but they're coming. Doors are about to open that you didn't even know existed. Opportunities are about to manifest that you never applied for. Resources are about to flow that you never worked to earn. Why? Because you paid for them in advance, with tears, with faithfulness, with obedience when it made no earthly sense. Right now, I need you to make a declaration that will activate every spiritual transaction you've ever made. Comment below and declare, "Obedience is my currency." Don't just type it, declare it. Let heaven hear you acknowledge that you understand the exchange rate. Let the enemy know that you're not confused about how God's economy works anymore. Because when you declare it, heaven takes notice. Angels are assigned, doors are unlocked, and the return on your investment begins to manifest in ways that will leave you breathless. So I ask you, chosen one, are you ready to stop begging for breakthrough and start recognizing that your obedience has already purchased it? Now that you understand obedience is heaven's currency, I need to expose something the enemy hoped you'd never discover. This battle was never really about your bank account. It was about your hands. Why do your hands hurt at night when you try to sleep? Why does your labor feel cursed instead of blessed? Why does every dollar you touch seem to slip through your fingers like water through a broken dam? Because there's been a spiritual war raging over the very instruments God designed to build his kingdom on earth. Your hands were made for building altars, not just paying bills. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. The enemy didn't attack your finances first. He attacked your hands first, because he knew that broke hands make broken altars. Weary hands make weak worship. Wounded hands struggle to war, and hell was terrified of what your hands could do when they were fully anointed. Think about this. When God created Adam, what was the first thing he gave him? Work, dominion, the ability to tend, to build, to create with his hands. Genesis 2:15 says God put man in the garden to work it and take care of it. Your hands weren't just designed for survival, they were designed for stewardship. But somewhere along the way, the enemy convinced you that your hands were only good for struggling, only capable of scraping by, only worthy of minimum wage and maximum stress. That's a lie from the pit of hell. Look at your hands right now. Really look at them. Those lines, those scars, those calluses. The world sees wear and tear, but God sees warfare, victory. Every meal you cooked when the cupboards were bare, every grandchild you held when your heart was breaking, every time you clapped in worship when you had nothing to praise about, every dollar you gave when you needed it yourself. Hell didn't fear your money, it feared your hands, because they still know how to war in worship. The Bible tells us in Psalm 24:4 about clean hands and a pure heart. But most people think that's just about avoiding sin. No, beloved, it's about understanding that clean hands are consecrated hands, hands that heaven can use, hands that hell can't stop. You've been wondering why every job feels like spiritual warfare, why every workplace seems toxic, why every boss treats you like you're expendable, why your skills are overlooked and your experience is undervalued. It's because the enemy knows what anointed hands can accomplish. When your hands are blessed by God, they don't just work, they create. They don't just earn, they establish. They don't just build careers, they build legacies. Moses understood this. When the Israelites were fighting the Amalekites in Exodus 17, the battle wasn't won with swords, it was won with hands. As long as Moses kept his hands raised, Israel prevailed. When his hands got tired and dropped, the enemy gained ground. That's been your story, hasn't it? You've been fighting battles with tired hands, worn out hands, hands that hurt from carrying burdens they were never meant to bear. But Aaron and Hur held up Moses' hands, and Israel won a complete victory. God is about to send you Aaron and Hur helpers, people who will support what your hands are building, partners who will hold up what your hands are creating, opportunities that will honor what your hands can accomplish. But first, you need to understand what the enemy was really trying to steal. He wasn't trying to make you poor. He was trying to make your hands powerless. Because when your hands are anointed, your touch changes atmospheres. When your hands are blessed, your work becomes worship. When your hands are consecrated, your labor becomes legacy. This is why David said in Psalm 90:17, "Establish the work of our hands for us." Yes, establish the work of our hands. He wasn't just praying for a job. He was praying for divine establishment, for heavenly backing, for supernatural success in everything his hands touched. And that's exactly what God wants to do for you. Poverty tried to make your hands unholy. It tried to convince you that your work was worthless, that your efforts were meaningless, that your touch brought nothing but trouble. But you still raised them in worship. You still served when no one was watching. You still gave when you barely had anything to give. You still cooked meals for family while crying tears they never saw. God saw it all. Every gesture, every sacrifice, every moment your hands moved in love instead of bitterness. And he's about to anoint them again. The prophet Isaiah spoke of hands in chapter 61, verse 3. God would give his people beauty for ashes, the oil of joy, for mourning the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. But look at what comes next, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. Your hands are about to plant trees of righteousness, not just for you, but for generations who will sit in the shade of what you build. Right now, I need you to do something that might feel strange, but it's absolutely essential. Hold your hands up, physically, right where you are. Don't be embarrassed. This is between you and heaven. Look at your palms, look at your fingers, and whisper these words, "God bless these again." Say it like you mean it. Say it like you're tired of your hands being cursed, and you're ready for them to be consecrated. Because in this moment, heaven is preparing to pour fresh anointing on the very hands that hell tried to make helpless. Your breakthrough isn't coming through your bank account, it's coming through your hands. The work is about to change. The wages are about to increase. The opportunities are about to multiply. But it starts with you recognizing that your hands were never the problem. They were always the promise. So what will you build with blessed hands, chosen one? What will you create when heaven backs your labor? What legacy will you leave when your touch carries divine favor? Beloved, I know the weight you've been carrying. I've seen the tears you've cried in quiet moments when no one was watching, wondering if God forgot about you. Let me heal a wound that's been bleeding in your soul for decades. You've been waiting for God to show up with provision. But what if he's been providing all along and you just didn't recognize his delivery method? Could it be that you were always funded, just not informed? Chosen one, I need you to sit with this truth for a moment. Your provision isn't late, it's just wearing different clothes. Your provision isn't late, it's just wearing different clothes. For years, you've been waiting for God to show up with a check in the mail, a promotion at work, or a windfall from somewhere obvious. You expected divine provision to look like human solutions, but that's not how heaven operates. When Elijah was starving by the brook Cherith, God didn't send him a food truck. He sent ravens, dirty scavenging birds that most people would shoo away. But they carried bread and meat twice a day for months. 1 Kings 17:6. When the widow of Zarephath was down to her last meal, preparing to die with her son, God didn't send her a grocery store gift card. He multiplied what was already in her pantry. The oil that should have run out kept flowing. The flour that should have been gone kept filling the jar. 1 Kings 17:14. Here's what I need you to understand. The oil wasn't running low. Your jars were just full of doubt. You've been staring at what you don't have, while God has been multiplying what you do have. Could it be that you were always funded, just not informed? That job you thought was beneath you? It kept your lights on when everything else was falling apart. That small social security check. It stretched further than your budget said it could. That neighbor who brought you groceries just because. That wasn't coincidence. That was divine coordination. That unexpected tax refund, that wasn't the IRS being generous. That was heaven backdating your blessing. You called it luck. You called it timing. You called it barely getting by. But God called it provision. When you didn't see cash, He sent clarity. When you didn't see funds, He sent favor. When you didn't see the money, He sent the miracle. How many times did your car break down right after you got paid? How many times did you find $20 in an old coat pocket exactly when you needed it? How many times did someone offer to help you for free when you couldn't afford to pay? You dismissed it as coincidence. But coincidence is just God's way of staying anonymous. The Bible tells us in Philippians 4:19, "My God will meet all your needs according to the riches of His glory in Christ Jesus." Notice it doesn't say He'll meet them according to your bank account. It says according to His riches. And His riches aren't limited to currency. His riches include relationships that show up at the right time, health that sustains you through difficult seasons, wisdom that helps you make decisions that save money you didn't know you were saving, peace that keeps you from making expensive mistakes born out of panic. Provision doesn't always knock. Sometimes it waits in the pantry of faith. That extra can of soup you forgot you had. That friend who called right when you needed encouragement. That opportunity that seemed small but opened bigger doors. That idea that came to you in the middle of the night and solved a problem you'd been wrestling with for months. All provision, all from God, all wearing clothes you didn't expect. You've been funded by a system that operates beyond banks, beyond paychecks, beyond anything Wall Street could measure or understand. He fed 5,000 people with a boy's lunch, not because the bread and fish were magical, but because when God multiplies, a little becomes unlimited. What little thing in your life has God been multiplying that you took for granted? Your good health when others your age are battling illnesses that cost thousands of dollars. Your peace of mind when others are paying therapists to help them sleep. Your family relationships when others are paying lawyers to solve what love used to handle for free. This is silent funding, beloved. God's been paying bills you never saw and providing resources you never counted. But here's the part that might shock you. He's been doing it through your faith, not despite your circumstances. Every time you praised Him, when you had nothing to praise about, you activated supernatural provision. Every time you gave when you barely had enough, you triggered divine multiplication. Every time you trusted when the evidence said doubt, you opened accounts in heaven's economy. The widow in 2 Kings 4 thought she was broke. She was about to lose her sons to debt collectors. But when the prophet asked, "What do you have in your house?" she found one small jar of oil. That's all God needed, one small jar of faith. And it filled every empty vessel she could find. The oil didn't stop flowing until she ran out of containers. What containers have you stopped bringing to God because you thought the oil ran out? Your dreams, your hopes, your prayers for breakthrough, your belief that things could change. You stopped bringing empty vessels because you thought God's oil was depleted. But the oil never stopped flowing. You just stopped believing there was more. Here's what I need you to do right here, right now. Go find one thing in your life that you've overlooked. One small blessing you took for granted. One provision you dismissed as ordinary. It might be the vessel God fills next. Maybe it's that skill you never thought was valuable. Maybe it's that relationship you never thought was significant. Maybe it's that opportunity you never thought was big enough. Because God doesn't need a bank to bless you. He used ravens to feed Elijah. He used a broke widow to host a prophet. He used a boy's lunch to feed a multitude. He specializes in making much out of little and something out of nothing. Your provision has been silent because it's been spiritual. Your funding has been invisible because it's been eternal. Your resources have been hidden because they've been holy, but your eyes are opening right now, and you're about to see provision everywhere you look. So I ask you, chosen one, are you ready to start recognizing God's silent funding that's been flowing through your life all along? Because once you do, you'll realize you were never broke. You were just blind to how rich you've always been. Listen to me, chosen one. I know what you're thinking as you watch the years pass by. You're looking at your birth certificate and wondering if it's too late. You're calculating the decades and asking if God still has time to bless someone who's already lived most of their life. You're whispering to yourself in the mirror, if God was going to do something with my life, wouldn't he have done it by now? Let me sit with you in this pain for a moment, because I've been where you are. The ache of watching younger people get promoted while you stay in the same position. The frustration of seeing others receive breakthroughs while your prayers seem to echo in empty rooms. The quiet desperation that comes when you realize you've been faithful for decades and the scoreboard still looks the same. But what if I told you something that will change how you see every delay you've endured? You didn't miss it. You were measured for it. And right now, the tailor of heaven is stitching your breakthrough in silence. If it took Abraham 25 years to receive his promise, why do you think your breakthrough should happen in 25 minutes? God's timeline doesn't operate on human urgency. It operates on divine precision. Abraham was 75 when God made the promise. He was 100 when Isaac was born. 25 years of waiting, 25 years of wondering, 25 years of people asking, where's this son God promised you? But here's what most people miss about Abraham's story. The delay wasn't punishment, it was preparation, not just for Abraham, but for the entire world. If Isaac had been born when Abraham was 76, he would have been the son of a young man's strength. But born when Abraham was 100, he became the son of supernatural power, the child of the impossible, the proof that God can create life from dead situations. Your delay has the same purpose. Every year you waited wasn't wasted. It was weighted with significance you couldn't see. Every season of silence wasn't abandonment. It was development. Every moment you felt forgotten was actually a moment you were being refined for something your younger self wasn't ready to carry. Delay is not denial, it's divine development. Think about Moses, 40 years in Pharaoh's palace learning leadership, 40 years in the wilderness learning humility, and then at 80 years old, when most people are thinking about retirement, God calls him to his greatest assignment, 80 years old. And his best work was still ahead of him. Joseph was 17 when he received the dream. He was 30 when he stepped into the palace. 13 years of preparation for a lifetime of purpose. But you've been in preparation mode for decades. Do you really think God invested all that time in you just to waste you now? Here's what the enemy hopes you'll never realize. You weren't left behind. You were held back. Held back so that when you finally step into your season, there's no competition, only confirmation. While others were building careers on talent, you were building character through trials. While others were networking their way to the top, you were being rooted deep in faith. While others were getting quick promotions, you were receiving rare preparation. And now, when you finally emerge, you won't just show up, you'll show out. Because delay develops things that speed can never produce. Wisdom that only comes from waiting. Patience that only comes from pressure. Faith that only comes from enduring when everything says, quit. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3:11, He has made everything beautiful in its time. Not in your time, in His time. And His time is always perfect, even when it doesn't feel timely. You think you're behind schedule, but you're actually right on time for the assignment God has been preparing you for. That job you didn't get at 30, it would have made you arrogant. That relationship that didn't work out at 40, it would have distracted you from your purpose. That opportunity that passed you by at 50, it would have positioned you in the wrong place when the real door opened. God's delays are divine protection disguised as disappointment. But here's the part that will shock you. Your greatest years aren't behind you. They're in front of you. Because when God releases someone who's been seasoned by time, tested by trials, and refined by rejection, they don't just succeed, they dominate. You're not too old to be used. You're finally old enough to be trusted. At 65, Colonel Sanders was broke and living on Social Security. At 65, he started KFC and built a global empire. At 78, Grandma Moses started painting and became one of America's most celebrated artists. At 81, Benjamin Franklin helped draft the Constitution. They didn't succeed despite their age. They succeeded because of it. Because wisdom is more valuable than energy. Experience is more powerful than enthusiasm, and character is more lasting than charisma. You've spent decades thinking your best days were behind you, but what if they're still being written? What if every gray hair is a crown of wisdom? What if every wrinkle is a line of experience that younger people can't buy? What if every scar is a story that only you can tell? The world worships youth, but heaven honors endurance. God isn't looking for the fastest runners. He's looking for the faithful finishers. And you, chosen one, you're still in the race. Right now, I need you to make a declaration that will break every chain of delay frustration that's been wrapped around your soul. Comment below, "Delay me, but don't deny me, Lord." Don't just type it, declare it. Let heaven know that you understand the difference between divine timing and human impatience. Because when you embrace the delay as development, you position yourself to receive not just what you wanted, but what you were truly meant for. Your time isn't up, your time is now. But are you ready to believe that God's best for you is still coming even if His timing doesn't match your timeline? Something shifted when you realized your wealth was a weapon. But there's another truth heaven needs to whisper directly into the secret chambers of your heart. You know that life you've been living lately, the quiet one, the one where you stopped calling people back, where you stopped going to events, where you started declining invitations and choosing solitude over socializing. They think you gave up. Your family thinks you got depressed. Your friends think you lost interest. But what if your isolation was actually your insulation? Let me speak to the part of you that no one else sees. The part that retreated not from weakness, but from wisdom. The part that stopped talking because you finally realized most conversations were just noise. You stopped sharing your dreams because people started calling them delusions. You stopped mentioning your prayers because they were met with eye rolls. You stopped explaining your faith because it was dismissed as fantasy. So you went quiet, and they interpreted your silence as surrender. But heaven saw it differently. You thought you were being silenced, but you were being soundproofed for sacred strategy. There's a price for the quiet life, chosen one, and you've been paying it without even knowing why. The loneliness that grips you some nights, the feeling of being disconnected from people who once felt close, the weight of carrying visions that no one else can see, the exhaustion of pretending everything is fine when inside you're wrestling with purposes too big for small talk. But what if I told you that God has been funding your silence, every conversation you avoided, every gathering you skipped, every phone call you let go to voicemail, every invitation you declined with excuses? You thought you were withdrawing from life, but you were actually withdrawing into assignment. Look at Jesus. At the height of his ministry, when the crowds were largest and the demand was greatest, what did he do? Luke 5:16 tells us, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." He didn't withdraw because he was antisocial. He withdrew because some conversations can only happen in solitude. Some downloads only come in silence. Some strategies are too sacred to develop in crowds. And that's exactly where you've been living. In the sacred silence where God speaks strategies that the marketplace would never understand. In the holy hush where heaven downloads dreams that would sound crazy to carnal ears. In the divine quiet where your spirit learns to hear frequencies that fellowship can't teach. You stopped talking, they stopped calling. You thought you were becoming irrelevant, but God said, hush, not because you were wrong, but because the next move is too sacred to speak about out loud. Here's what you didn't realize while you were in silence: God was in preparation mode. Every friendship that faded wasn't loss. It was liberation from relationships that would have drained your energy during the season when you needed to conserve it for what's coming. Every social gathering you missed wasn't isolation. It was insulation from influences that would have diluted your focus when clarity was crucial. Every small talk conversation you avoided wasn't rudeness. It was wisdom protecting your words for weightier purposes. You weren't being ignored. You were being incubated, like a mother eagle that removes her eaglets from the comfort of the nest and places them in isolation until they're ready to soar. God has been positioning you in sacred solitude until your wings are strong enough for the flight He's planned. But the enemy wanted you to interpret this isolation as rejection. He wanted you to believe that your silence meant you were forgotten. He tried to convince you that your withdrawal was evidence of your irrelevance. That's a lie from the pit of hell. The prophet Elijah understood this. After his victory over the prophets of Baal, when Jezebel threatened his life, he ran to a cave. Not because he was weak, but because some revelations only come in caves. And it was there, in the isolation, that God spoke to him, not in the wind, earthquake, or fire, but in a still small voice. 1 Kings 19:12. Your cave season wasn't punishment, it was preparation. While others were building networks, you were building character. While others were expanding their circles, you were deepening your relationship with the only one whose opinion truly matters. While others were chasing connections, you were cultivating communion. And now you're about to understand why the silence was necessary. Because when God is ready to move you from isolation to influence, from hiddenness to honor, from cave to calling, you won't be dependent on human validation. You won't need applause to affirm your assignment. You won't require consensus to confirm your calling. You'll move with the quiet confidence that comes from those who've learned to hear heaven's voice above earth's noise. But here's the part that might shock you: your quiet season is almost over. The same God who funded your silence is about to finance your speech. The same heaven that insulated you in isolation is about to position you in influence. The same Spirit that spoke to you in caves is about to use you to speak to crowds. But you'll speak differently now. Not from desperation for acceptance, but from deep assurance of assignment. Not to impress people, but to impact them. Not to gain followers, but to fulfill purpose. The price you paid for the quiet life was steep. The loneliness was real. The misunderstanding was painful. The silence was costly. But every payment was an investment into something that couldn't be built in public. Right here in this moment of divine revelation, I need you to whisper something to yourself. Not out loud, just to your own soul. Whisper this: God has been funding my silence. Let that truth settle into the wounded places where you thought you were forgotten. Let it heal the parts of your spirit that felt abandoned. Let it restore your understanding of why the journey had to be so lonely. Then type it like covenant in the comments: God has been funding my silence. Because when you acknowledge that your isolation was insulation, you give heaven permission to move you from the cave to the calling. So tell me, chosen one, are you ready to understand that your quiet life wasn't a dead end but a divine detour, preparing you for something your public life could never produce? Something supernatural happens when you understand that God has been funding your silence. The veil between the natural and spiritual begins to tear, and you start to see what's been hidden in plain sight. There is an economy operating beyond the Federal Reserve, beyond Wall Street, beyond anything earthly banks could measure or understand. And you, chosen one, have been transacting in it for decades without even knowing it. What if everything you gave up was recorded in a heavenly ledger? Listen carefully, because what I'm about to reveal will rewrite everything you thought you knew about wealth provision and how heaven keeps its books. There is a currency heaven honors that's not seen on any stock exchange. It's not traded on foreign markets. It can't be counterfeited by human hands or manipulated by government policy. It's written in secret journals, measured in silent sacrifices, calculated in prayers no one applauded, and God saw every cent of surrender. You've been tithing in tears, making deposits in faith, compounding interest through silence. While you were crying about what you didn't have, heaven was recording what you gave. While you were mourning your losses, angels were documenting your investments. While you were counting your lacks, God was calculating your spiritual assets. The widow who gave her 2 mites understood this economy. Mark 12:42. Jesus didn't praise her for the amount. He honored her for the proportion. She gave more than all the rich men because she gave from her need, not her excess. You've been giving from your need for years. Every time you chose faith over fear when your bank account was empty. Every time you praised God when your circumstances said doubt. Every time you forgave when revenge would have felt sweeter. Every time you served when you felt forgotten. Those weren't just acts of obedience. Those were transactions in heaven's economy. The prophet Malachi spoke of this when he said in chapter 3, verse 10, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse." But most people think he was only talking about money. He was talking about your whole life, your complete surrender, your total investment in things eternal. And when you bring that level of commitment, God promises to throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. That promise isn't future tense. It's activation waiting to be triggered. Here's what the earthly economy will never teach you. In heaven's system, loss equals leverage. Sacrifice equals equity. Obedience equals ownership. Every relationship you lost because you chose righteousness over compromise, that was you buying stock in integrity. Every opportunity you walked away from because it didn't align with God's voice, that was you investing in divine direction. Every dollar you gave when you could barely afford it, that was you purchasing favor you couldn't see. Your midnight obedience has been your payment plan for miracles you haven't received yet, but they're coming due. Think about Job. He lost everything visible to gain everything invisible. His children, his wealth, his health, his reputation. But at the end of his trial, Job 42:10 tells us, "The Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before." But here's what most people miss. God didn't just restore Job's possessions. He restored his revelation. Job said in chapter 42, verse 5, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you." The real wealth wasn't the doubled livestock or the new children. It was the doubled intimacy with God. You've been depositing in the same account. Every season you chose worship over worry. Every moment you trusted when the evidence said panic. Every time you blessed God's name when his plan didn't make sense. You weren't just being spiritual. You were being strategic in an economy that operates beyond human understanding. But here's the mystery that will shake you. Your next miracle has already been paid for with your midnight obedience. That breakthrough you've been praying for. The account has sufficient funds. That door you've been asking God to open, you've already made the down payment. That healing you've been believing for, it's been pre-approved by your faithful transactions. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 4:17, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." The word achieving is a financial term. Your troubles aren't just teaching you, they're earning for you. Your trials aren't just testing you, they're investing for you. Every sleepless night you spent interceding for your children. Every tear you cried over a prodigal. Every prayer you whispered for a marriage that seemed dead. Every time you stood in the gap when others gave up. Those were deposits in an account that compounds at rates earthly banks could never match. But heaven's economy operates on different principles than Earth's system. In Earth's economy, you get what you pay for. In heaven's economy, you get what you gave up for. In Earth's economy, timing is everything. In heaven's economy, faithfulness is everything. In Earth's economy, you invest money to make money. In heaven's economy, you invest faith to move mountains. And right now, your spiritual portfolio is about to mature. The interest has been building. The dividends are ready for distribution. The return on your investment is about to be released. But you have to recognize the currency you've been using. Every act of forgiveness was a deposit. Every season of serving was an investment. Every moment of worship in the wilderness was a transaction that purchased breakthrough you haven't seen yet. What if the reason you felt so spiritually rich, even when you were financially poor, is because you've been trading in heaven's currency all along? Right now, I need you to acknowledge what's been happening in the invisible realm. Comment below, "I've been making deposits in the invisible bank." Don't just type it casually. Declare it as recognition of a reality you're just now understanding. Because when you acknowledge heaven's economy, you give God permission to honor your transactions. Watch how God responds when you finally understand that your faithfulness has been your financial strategy all along. So tell me, chosen one, are you ready to see your spiritual investments pay dividends in the natural realm? Because the economy of heaven is about to intersect with your earthly experience in ways that will leave you breathless. Listen to me with the urgency of someone whose life depends on hearing this clearly. Your spiritual investments are about to pay out, but I need to warn you of something that could cause you to miss the very miracle you've been praying for. The transfer is coming, but it won't look like a deposit. It'll look like an interruption. Would you recognize abundance if it came disguised as inconvenience? Here's what's about to shock you. God is preparing to send you harvests wearing homeless clothes, breakthroughs dressed as breakdowns, promotions packaged as problems. And if you're not spiritually alert, you'll walk right past your answered prayer because it doesn't match the picture in your mind. The world trained you to expect wealth to look wealthy, to expect blessing to look blessed, to expect miracles to announce themselves with fanfare and formal presentation. But heaven operates by divine contradiction. God sent the Savior of the world through an unwed teenage girl in a barn. He chose fishermen to be apostles. He picked a murderer to write half the New Testament. He used a prostitute's house to hide his spies. If the most important deliveries in biblical history came in unexpected packaging, what makes you think your breakthrough will be gift-wrapped in gold? Your next chapter isn't coming through a contract. It's coming through a conversation with someone you almost overlooked. Your provision isn't coming through a paycheck. It's coming through a person who doesn't look like prosperity. Get ready, chosen one. Your blessing is in costume. That phone call you almost didn't answer might be carrying your promotion. That invitation you were going to decline might be your open door. That person who irritates you might be carrying the key to your kingdom. Remember Naaman, the Syrian commander with leprosy, came to Elisha expecting a grand ceremony. Instead, the prophet didn't even come outside. He sent a servant with simple instructions: go wash in the Jordan 7 times. Kings 5:10. Naaman was furious. This wasn't how healing was supposed to look. This wasn't dignified enough for a man of his status. This was insulting, not inspiring. He almost walked away from his miracle because the delivery method offended his expectations. But his servants convinced him to try it. And when he dipped 7 times in that muddy river, his flesh became like that of a young boy. complete healing, total restoration, but only because he didn't reject his answered prayer in strange packaging. How many times have you walked away from your breakthrough because it didn't look like breakthrough? How many open doors did you ignore because they seemed too small? How many divine appointments did you miss because they felt like interruptions? The enemy's greatest strategy isn't to steal your blessing. It's to make you reject it when it arrives in unexpected form. He knows you've been praying for financial increase, so he'll make sure when the opportunity comes, it looks like more work instead of more money. He knows you've been asking for relationships, so he'll tempt you to dismiss the person who doesn't fit your criteria, but carries your connection. He knows you've been seeking direction, so he'll convince you that the open door is too risky, too different beneath what you thought you deserved. But God specializes in sending 5-star blessings in 1-star packaging. The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 1:27, God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. Your answered prayer might look foolish to other people. Your breakthrough might seem weak compared to what you imagined. Your miracle might confuse those who think they know how God operates, but it will be yours if you recognize it. David wasn't supposed to kill Goliath. He was just bringing lunch to his brothers. But when he heard the giant mocking God's army, he saw an opportunity everyone else called impossible. The stones in his shepherd's bag became weapons of warfare. The skills he learned protecting sheep became the training that slayed a champion. What tools do you already have that don't look like tools? What skills do you possess that don't feel significant? What connections do you carry that seem ordinary? Your giant killing moment might be hidden in what you consider mundane. But here's the part that will challenge everything you think you know about receiving from God. Sometimes the transfer comes through loss, not gain. Sometimes God has to close one door to authorize another. Sometimes he has to end one season to fund the next. Sometimes what looks like subtraction is actually divine multiplication. When Ruth lost her husband, it looked like devastation. But that loss positioned her to meet Boaz and enter the lineage of Jesus. When Joseph was sold into slavery, it seemed like betrayal. But that rejection positioned him to save nations. Your current frustration might be God's way of positioning you for your future fortune. That job you lost might have been heaven clearing your schedule for something bigger. That relationship that ended might have been God protecting you from a distraction. That opportunity that fell through might have been divine redirection towards something better. But you'll only see it if you stop mourning what you lost and start watching for what's being prepared. Right now, in this very moment, I need you to make a declaration that will protect you from missing your miracle when it arrives in unexpected form. Say it with me out loud. I will not reject my answered prayer in strange packaging. Say it like you mean it. Say it like your breakthrough depends on it. Because it does. The Pharisees missed Jesus because he didn't match their messianic expectations. The religious leaders rejected him because his methodology didn't fit their theology. Don't make their mistake. Your blessing might come through the person you least expect. Your promotion might arrive disguised as a problem to solve. Your breakthrough might look like a breakdown at first glance. But if you have the spiritual eyes to see past the packaging to the purpose, you'll receive what others reject. The question isn't whether God is going to bless you. The question is whether you'll recognize the blessing when it shows up wearing work clothes instead of a tuxedo. Are you ready to receive your miracle, even if it doesn't look like what you ordered? Because the transfer is about to happen, and it's going to surprise everyone, including you. Chosen one, we've walked through sacred territory together today. Carry these truths like treasures in your heart. Remember, you are not broke. You are banked in heaven's economy. Your obedience has been your currency, and every act of faithfulness has been making deposits you couldn't see. Remember, your hands were made for building altars, not just paying bills. God is about to anoint them for kingdom work that will impact generations. Remember, true wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you no longer have to chase. You've learned the difference between God's abundance and the world's addiction. Remember, your silence wasn't abandonment. It was divine insulation. God funded your quiet seasons to prepare you for public assignments. Remember, every tear was a tithe. Every sacrifice was an investment. Your spiritual portfolio is about to pay dividends in heaven's secret economy. And remember, when your breakthrough comes, it might not look like what you expected. Don't reject your answered prayer because it arrives in strange packaging. But here's what I need you to know. You are not walking this journey alone. God hasn't forgotten your address. His love for you isn't performance-based, and His plans aren't dependent on your perfection. Right now, across this nation, there are chosen ones just like you who understand exactly what you've been through, who know the weight of carrying visions that seem too big. You are part of a community that prays when you can't speak, believes when you doubt, and stands in faith when you feel like falling. We see you, we honor your journey, and we're standing with you in this moment of divine transition. So let me ask you this, knowing that your delay was development and your silence was strategy, knowing that God has been building something in you that the world desperately needs, what will you do with this revelation? Will you go back to measuring your worth by your wallet, or will you walk forward knowing that you carry treasures that can't be counted in earthly currency? Let's pray together. Father, I come before your throne on behalf of every chosen one who has heard this word today. I place my hand on their shoulder and speak your peace over their anxious hearts, your provision over their empty places, and your purpose over their confused minds. Lord, you've recorded every sacrifice, collected every tear, and honored every act of obedience. Now release what you've been storing for them in heavenly vaults. Break open the windows of heaven and pour out blessings they won't have room to contain. Not just financial blessings, but relational restoration, physical healing, emotional wholeness, and spiritual authority. Strengthen their hands for the work ahead. Anoint their minds with divine strategy. Fill their hearts with unshakable peace, and let them know their best days are being written right now. Silence every voice of discouragement. Cancel every assignment of delay. Break every chain of limitation. Release them into the fullness of what you've called them to be. What the enemy meant for harm, you are turning for good. What felt like endings are actually new beginnings. Cover them tonight. Speak to them in their dreams. Let them wake up with fresh faith, renewed hope, and supernatural expectation. In Jesus' name, amen. If this message stirred something deep in your spirit, comment below and tell us what revelation hit you hardest. Share what God spoke to your heart during this time together. And if you know someone who's been feeling forgotten or financially frustrated, share this message with them. Sometimes God uses us to deliver His love letters to people who need to know they're not alone. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Thank you for opening your heart to receive what heaven wanted to deposit. And thank you for being part of this community of chosen ones who refuse to give up on God's promises. If this content has blessed you, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because this isn't just entertainment. This is equipping. This is a family of believers who understand that God's ways are higher than our ways. You are loved. You are chosen. You are not forgotten, and your divine appointment with destiny is happening right now.